Hi, and welcome back to my channel, where I'm going to cover the Warlock's Undying class specialization from the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, providing a brief description of the subclass, as well as explain and set up the various features gained. As you know, a Warlock works with a patron to gain access to their powers, and thus, this subclass is no exception to that. However, the Undying is a patron who has mastered death, and is able to impart that knowledge onto their subordinates. They also represent the most evil of aspects in relation to being a Warlock, and this is primarily due to the very nature of their power. For instance, some example patrons that your Warlock could worship would be Vecna, the Lord of the Hand and the Eye, the Lich Queen Vol, Warlock, the Shadow King, and many other examples that are shown in the information panel for this class specialization. All of these creatures and wizards were once known for their cruelty, jealousy, and in general, evil nature overall. However, because of their expertise in death, your Warlock will be able to master all aspects of death that might be problematic for others to understand, and you'll see this come through as we go over the various features. Warlocks, unlike many of the other classes, acquire their patron at level 1, and this is because of the nature of their power. Their pact is what allows your character to cast their spells and make use of the various underpinnings of the knowledge of their character's patron. And this is why you have to choose this patron at level 1. As such, I'm going to go quickly create a level 1 Warlock via the character wizard and then bring you back when I'm about to select the class specialization just to show you how that works. I'm at the point where I'm about to choose the Warlock class. As soon as I do that, it is going to ask me for my class specialization. And in this particular case, I want to choose the Undying. And that is going to allow us to continue on with the rest of this particular selection. The one thing I want to point out in relation to this character wizard is that even though we're gaining access to the expanded spell list, these spells are actually not going to be listed here in the level 1 listing. So if you look here, we have access to False Life and Ray of Sickness. That simply doesn't show up here. Oops, I didn't want to move the window. None of those are available. So as a Dungeon Master, what I would allow you to do as the player is you can choose any spells that you want from this particular listing, or none at all if you so wanted. And then when your character sheet was created, you can just drag and drop these spells into your character sheet if you wanted to be able to go that route. Or replace one that you had chosen through this particular character wizard with one of these two in order for you to be able to select them. One of the first options you're going to have as you select this class specialization is the means to add new spells to your castable spells listing. These spells are not automatically given to your character. They are simply an expanded list of spells you can choose from in relation to what spells your character will have. To showcase this, take a look at your Pact Magic information sheet from the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide version of the class. You'll notice that no link exists in relation to the Warlock spells table, and this is because this module is only adding a limited number of spells to Dungeons & Dragons in general for the Warlock class. The main information sheet for the class that comes from the player's handbook is where you're going to find access to your spell listings or your spell table. And you will notice that none of these particular spells that show up here are going to appear in this particular list, because this is only going to show you a list of all of the spells that the player's handbook itself introduced. I honestly don't know why they did not provide a linkable table, much like the player's handbook does, but it's something that is set up, and that's the way that it seems to be configured at this particular point in time. Now, unfortunately, at level 1, your character is only going to have access to one spell slot, but they do have the ability to know 2 spells. And what this means is that you can choose any one of the spells that you want to choose from the main default player's handbook listing, or pick any one of these in place of one of the other ones that you've already selected. Now, in this case, I selected Hellish Rebuke and Witch Bolt. I'm going to actually change Hellish Rebuke for Ray of Sickness. And to do that, all I do is drag Ray of Sickness over and delete Hellish Rebuke. And that's an easy way to show you how you can simply swap a particular spell for one that you want to take from your patron. Also at level 1, your character is going to gain the Among the Dead feature, which grants you a few capabilities not normally available to a Warlock. The first is the means to learn the Spare the Dying cantrip, and this is going to be in addition to your known listing of cantrips and does not count against that list in relation to the class. So what we can do is very quickly look for Spare the Dying and drag and drop that into our cantrips listing. Another change is that your character is going to have advantage on all saving throws that would result in a disease effect being applied to your character. But the more interesting feature that I want to cover is how this affects the undead, specifically when they attempt to attack your character. For this, if an undead creature attempts to attack you, they must make a wisdom-based saving throw, and if they fail, they are forced to do one of two things. The first option is that they can simply choose another target and attack them instead. The other option is that they lose their spell or attack and essentially forfeit that particular spell or attack action for their turn. No matter what option they selected, meaning the DM had chosen that, they cannot attack your character for the remaining duration of that turn, but are susceptible to being affected by the same effect again during the next round if you chose to use the Among the Dead on them again. This is because the Among the Dead effect is meant to only come into play during the attack or spell actions of that particular turn, and simply distract them towards another target while they make that attack. This is why no duration is defined for those creatures that have failed the saving throw, and there is no usage limitation, meaning that if 10 undead creatures attempted to attack you in a single round, you can force all 10 of them to make that saving throw. This is not a reaction, and it won't consume your reaction as part of this process. Now, if the undead creature makes a saving throw, or if they are one that had failed but then they suffer damage or an ill effect from your character, they will become immune to that effect for a total of 24 hours. This means that if you're in combat with an undead creature that is forced to flee, maybe a vampire or a lich or something like that, and as a last-ditch effort your character hits them with a witch bolt, then that creature is immune to the effects of ignoring your character during combat until 24 hours after they were hit with that witch bolt. Setting up this feature in our Actions tab is actually not going to be overly difficult. What we want to do is go through and drag and drop that into place, make sure it's in the right power group, and make sure that the power group is set up to use our Charisma modifier, and that's because all of our features and spells make use of Charisma for the subclass. The next thing I want to do is ensure that I add a convenience effect here, and this is literally just going to be informative. I am, however, going to set up a limitation of 1 round, and the reason for that is because for the remaining duration of that undead creature's turn, they can't attack your character. But as soon as that turn circles back around again, they will be able to attack your character. Obviously, unless they fail their saving throw again. And I'll show how this works in a moment, but the last thing I want to discuss is this advantage on saving throws in relation to anything with a disease effect. Unfortunately, Fantasy Grounds doesn't have the ability to detect or create something that has disadvantage against or advantage against disease-related stuff. All you're going to have to do is click on this, but you as the player have the onus of asking the Dungeon Master, hey, is this going to apply a disease effect on my character? If so, I have advantage on those saving throws. I've gone ahead and set up a quick combat scenario here, and what I've got is a couple of undead creatures, some skeletons, a vampire, and a zombie in relation to what the Dungeon Master has set up here. When a skeleton in this particular case makes the attack against our particular character, here's what's going to happen. The Dungeon Master is going to declare that Skeleton 11 is going to attack the Warlock. At that point, even before the Dungeon Master makes their attack roll, you can say, I'm going to use the Among the Dead feature and attempt to redirect that attack. So you're going to drop that onto the skeleton that's making the attack, and as long as they have failed, you get to apply this effect. You also should set it up so that the target of that effect is directly related to the Warlock character. And you can get to that by expanding on this particular icon here. You can click on that and it will expand the list of effects on that skeleton. Now what will happen is that the Dungeon Master will then have to unlock your character from the target list of the skeleton and either choose the Paladin or the Cleric. And in this case, I'm going to choose the Cleric because they're already down, which critically hit them. So, boom, that Cleric's dead. In any event, that's the effect and how it works in relation to a particular skeleton. When it comes to how it goes through to the end of the round, you'll notice that because we set that as 1 round in duration, as soon as this round finishes, this effect remains. But as soon as the round starts, it disappears. This is perfect. This is what we want because that effect should only stick around up to the end of the round, and then it will allow us to go through and reapply that effect. However, you are going to want to create an additional effect here because you are going to want to reflect if a creature passed their saving throw that they are now immune to the effect of this particular feature. To do that, I'm going to add another convenience effect to this particular feature. I'm going to call it Among the Dead, semicolon, immune, colon, among the dead. It's also going to be configured for a 24-hour period. And this is just in case a particular creature is able to escape from combat, i.e. this vampire, for example. There's a very good chance that they're going to succeed on any saving throw that they have to make against this effect. And because of that, we want to reflect that. If this skeleton, and I'll continue using the skeleton as the example, had managed to succeed on their saving throw, instead of dropping this effect in place, we would have dropped this effect in place, and then also linked that to our character. It's not 100% clear whether the Among the Dead would be something that could be used by another character who happens to have that particular feature. However, I want to be sure that that is linked to your Warlock character in order to indicate to the Dungeon Master, yeah, it was my character that applied this, not JoJo's character, for example. And then this gives the Dungeon Master the ability to, after a determined amount of time within their game world, they expire the effect, and then that creature now becomes vulnerable to this particular feature once again. The same thing will happen if a particular undead creature failed a saving throw initially and then was hit by your character by either a spell or an attack. If in either of those particular cases, that effect was in place in the sense that the Among the Dead effect was there, like this, when your character attacked this vampire, if they managed to succeed and hit and do damage, this effect would be removed, and this would now be applied to that particular character or creature. And that's because of the second definition in relation to this particular feature. And in relation to anything that is saving throw specific for any disease-related effects, as I said earlier, if you're going to be required to actually go through and trigger a saving throw, you will just want to make sure that you have the advantage flag enabled first before you actually execute that saving throw roll. And you want to ensure that the Dungeon Master is aware, hey, if you are giving me or requiring me to make a saving throw that could end up with the effect of a disease, I have advantage on those. And then the Dungeon Master is either going to say, no, in this case you don't, or yes, you do. Go ahead and click on your advantage roll. And that's what you'll want to do. And there's a chance that if they're saying, no, you don't, it means that you're not getting a disease effect as a result of the saving throw. When your character reaches Warlock level 6, they are going to gain the Defy Death feature, giving your character a means to regain some hit points under specific conditions. The first condition applies when your character is in the process of making death-based saving throws, and if they succeed on a death-based saving throw, they can then attempt to regain 1d8 plus your character's Constitution modifier in hit points back at the time that they make that saving throw. And what I mean by that is that if down at the bottom portion of your character sheet here, you can see that there are death saves here. If your character is actively rolling on a death-based saving throw, which in this case they would have failed, let's see if we can get a success. There we go, that would have succeeded. When your character succeeds, they will be able to pick up a 1d8, roll the dice, add this value plus your character's Constitution modifier to the total number of hit points that they have, meaning you're reducing your wounds. So let's say that we were at 39 wounds. In this particular case, we would be able to add 6 hit points or subtract 6 hit points from this particular wound category. So that would be 33. This means that our character is alive, but we have 6 hit points. However, if your character continues to fail your death-based saving throws, then you will not be able to attempt to roll those extra hit points to be able to regain them. The other time that this comes into play is if your character is attempting to stabilize another creature using the Spare the Dying cantrip. This, at the time that you use that feature, will trigger your ability to attempt to heal yourself. And it doesn't come into play where you're healing that particular character, you're healing your own character. And this feature does have a usage limitation in that once it's used, your character will have to complete a long rest in order to be able to use it again. So let's go ahead and set this up on our character's action sheet. I'm going to copy this down to the power group here, and the heal is already in place. And you'll notice that it is intentionally set up on self, and this is required. This is how this is going to work. So I've gone ahead and set up a quick combat scenario here, and you'll notice that I have 38 wounds in relation to the total number of hit points that our character has. This means we have 1 hit point left. I'm going to go ahead and make an attack with the skeleton in an attempt to hit our Warlock. And that is going to be a hit. So I'm going to do damage, which it's going to knock our character down because of the amount of damage that they have suffered. At this particular point in time, our character is now going to be making death-based saving throws. As soon as I pass this turn onto that Warlock, it's going to automatically roll that saving throw. In this case, it was a success. And I don't know why that didn't show up on the player side, but in any event, it is a success. This means that our character can now execute this. And we will regain 7 hit points, and because a heal is automatically being applied, the unconscious effect is going to go away. But here's the thing. This has 1 daily use. That means that we need to configure this particular feature to only be used once. So you do that by going to the preparation thing and making sure it has 1 use here and that this is set for daily. Now, under a combat-based situation, now that I've used this, I have to make sure that it is ticked off so that it disappears from our ability to be able to use it again until we complete that long rest. Another situation where it can come into play is if I go ahead and set up our cleric to be the target of this particular skeleton, and we connect with that particular cleric. That's going to be a miss. That's still going to be a miss. There we go, that'll be, nope, that's still a miss, but in this case I'm going to make it a hit. I'm going to roll damage against that cleric, and they're going to be knocked unconscious. You can see that here. When it comes around to your turn, 1 second here. At this particular point in time, your character could use the Defy Death feature and attempt to use the Spare the Dying cantrip on that particular character. And you can do that simply by saying that you're going to use Spare the Dying. And as soon as you do that, you will be able to set up a modified effect here. I actually don't know why Spare the Dying doesn't have the Stabilize effect applied, because as soon as you apply that, it should trigger the effect. In any event, I'm going to go ahead and look for effects, look for Stabilized, or Stable, and drop that onto the cleric. I've now used that particular feature on this cleric. That means I can now attempt to roll this and regain some hit points had I had any damage. That's exactly how this particular feature works. And again, you tick that off to indicate that you've used it. At Warlock level 10, your character is going to gain the Undying nature feature, allowing your character to benefit from your patron's Undying abilities. At this stage in your character's life, they no longer need to breathe, consume food and water, nor do they need to sleep. Although avoiding sleep does mean that your character would not regain any particular spell slots or the use of features that happen to have a rest requirement. Your character would still need to sleep to regain features they've used that require short or long rests, as well as to recover spell slots and reduce exhaustion. But otherwise, your character would no longer need to sleep and can use that time while others cannot. Another change is that your character's aging process slows down, such that if 10 years happen to pass by, your character is only going to age 1 year, thus extending your character's overall lifespan significantly. If you've set up your character so that they're on the older side, say 67 years of age, then they're obviously not going to benefit as much as a particular character that was set up to be, say, 24 years of age. And the last ability that this gives you is that any magical effect that might age your character is no longer going to have that effect, such as the touch of a ghost or an accelerated aging spell, as your character is now immune to that kind of magic. Now, this isn't a feature that we need to add to our action sheet, nor does it really need a demonstration. It just means that your character no longer needs to carry around food and water rations, nor do they need to sleep. However, if you happen to use all of your spell slots that you have here, or you happen to go through and burn through any of these particular features, like we have the Defy Death one there that is missing, your character is going to need to rest in order to regain those. For all other intents and purposes, your character no longer needs to sleep. And if your Dungeon Master wants to see the information sheet on that, all you have to do is make sure you drag and drop it from your features listing here. Oop, that's the Among the Dead one. Hang on. I need Undying Nature. There we go. And you can just drop it into place. As long as this is in your actual features listing, you'll be able to drag and drop it there. You don't need it in your actions tab to be able to do so. The final feature that your character is going to gain through this subclass is called Indestructible Life, and it will happen when your character reaches Warlock level 14. One of the advantages of this feature is the means to reattach dismembered body parts that happen to be stripped away from your character in some way, shape, or form. For example, if during combat your character lost a finger or an arm or any other body part, it can be reattached, and it will be as if it was never removed in the first place. There won't even be a scar. Now, someone might be thinking, what happens if your character's head is decapitated without having been reduced to 0 hit points first? For a character not of this particular class specialization, I would assume that that would mean your character is instantly reduced to 0 hit points and you were outright killed. However, as a warlock of this nature does not need food, water, or sleep, or even air to remain alive, technically they also don't need their body simply to remain alive. I would not consider the warlock of this level to be automatically reduced to 0 hit points in that situation, and instead, life simply transfers to the head versus the body as a whole. Because of this, you could direct a party member to place the head and the body in the correct position to allow this feature to kick in and become applicable. Thus, your character does have the means to survive a beheading, and until someone comes around and to help reattach your character's head to their body, both would simply exist, waiting for that to happen because of all of the other features that your character has gained thus far, and because of the support of your patron. But this is one of those rare moments where a dungeon master is probably going to have to be convinced of this capability, rather than their automatic reaction of, nope, you're dead, flat out, plain and simple. But do not be surprised if a dungeon master does rule against you in this particular situation, because every dungeon master is going to rule a little bit differently. But that's the way that I would rule in this particular situation as a dungeon master. Now, the other capability this feature gives your characters the means to heal themselves 1d8 plus your character's warlock level as a bonus action. And I'll be sure to show you how to set that up in a moment. However, there's one last thing I want to discuss around this particular feature, and is that your character is going to need to complete a short or a long rest after they use this feature after one use. This means that you can only do this once during a combat situation. If you got beheaded a second time, you're done. It's that simple. Now, setting this up, once again, is not an overly complicated process. All you need to do is make sure that you have your group in your clipboard, drag and drop this into place, and then make sure you paste that particular group into place. And you will see here that the effect is already set up and configured for us. We have our 1d8 plus 14, because that's equal to our level, already configured to go. So how does this feature actually work? Well, during your turn, it doesn't matter whether you've already made your attack, whether you've just completed a movement or whatever, you have the ability to use this feature as a bonus action. That means that you can say, oh, I am currently down 45 hit points. I'm going to go ahead and use this particular effect here, and I'm going to set this up for one daily use because that is a limitation here. I'm going to go ahead and use this feature here to go through and heal myself 1d8 plus 14 hit points. So I'm going to go ahead. There, I've done. I tag that I've used that, and now I can make my attack action, if I haven't already done one, and I can also do movement if I haven't already done one. So those are the kinds of things that your character will be able to do in relation to healing themselves for this particular feature set. This class specialization is not completely unique in what capabilities it has, but it is one of the first to introduce these kinds of concepts into the Warlock class. This is the perfect class for a party versus party campaign, or one that is set in an extremely dark campaign setting, or one that focuses entirely on the undead and their overall nature. However, this does bring us to the end of this particular video. I hope you found it useful and informative, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. I want to thank you for watching this video, and if you found the information useful, click on that like button as well as leave a comment below, as it helps the channel gain exposure. Also, consider subscribing, as I release content similar to this topic quite regularly on the channel.